Imagine you're an archaeologist, and deep in the ruins of medieval castle, you find a perfectly preserved smartphone. It's that kind of feeling, that out-of-place, out-of-time discovery we're digging into today. But instead of a phone, it was the name of one of history's most famous gods, found in a place it just shouldn't be. Right, so the name was Mithra. You've probably heard of him. He was the main deity in a super popular Roman mystery cult that was all the rage around 100 AD. So, you can imagine the confusion when his name turned up on a clay tablet in Turkey, dated more than 1,000 years before the Romans even showed up. How did that happen? Well, that's the historical cold case we're about to solve. Okay, so our investigation kicks off with that first critical piece of evidence, a single name, spotted where absolutely no one expected to find it. Let's set the scene. The year is 1907. A German archaeologist, Hugo Winkler, is deep in the dirt, excavating the ruins of Hattusa. This was the ancient capital of the mighty Hittite Empire, right in the heart of modern-day Turkey. He's uncovering the royal archives, literally thousands of clay tablets, a historian's dream. And among all these records, he finds this incredible document, an international treaty. It's basically a peace deal between one of the most powerful Hittite kings, Suppiluliuma-I, yeah, we'll just call him the Hittite king, and a rival king from the Mitanni Kingdom named Şattiwaza. This thing is a snapshot of Bronze Age politics from over 3,300 years ago. Now back then, you didn't just sign on the dotted line. To make a treaty ironclad, both kings had to swear an oath to their gods, and these gods were all listed as divine witnesses. So the Hittites listed their gods, and then the Mitanni listed theirs, and right there, etched in cuneiform, was the name Mithra. Suddenly, we have a mystery on our hands. So to really get why this name is such a big deal, we need to know who was at the negotiating table, so to speak, because this region was a real melting pot of different cultures. First up, you had the Hatti. These were the original inhabitants, the native people of the land. They weren't Indo-European, and their religion was all about local deities, like the incredibly powerful sun goddess of Arena. Then, along come the Hittites. They spoke an Indo-European language, and they built this massive empire starting around 2000 BCE. But they were pretty clever about it. Instead of just wiping out the local culture, they absorbed a ton of it, even adopting many of the Hatti gods into their own state religion. They're the ones who wrote this treaty. And finally, we get to the other side of the deal, the Mitanni, a major rival to the Hittites. Now, most of their population spoke a language called Hurrian, and listen up, because this is the key to the whole puzzle, their rulers, the warrior elite, were totally different. They had Indo-Aryan names, and they worshipped Indo-Aryan gods. And that changes everything. You know, the real breakthrough here wasn't just finding the name. It came from looking at how the Hittite scribe actually wrote it down. It's like finding a linguistic fingerprint at the scene of the crime, and it tells us the whole story. When we zoom in on the list of gods the Mitanni kings swore on, we see that Mithra wasn't alone. He was there with a very specific crew, Varuna, Indra, and the Nesit twins. And this is where it all clicks. This isn't some local Anatolian pantheon. No way. This is the A-list from the Rig Veda, the sacred texts of ancient India. The presence of these gods together is a massive confirmation of that Indo-Aryan connection for the Mitanni elite. And here it is, folks, the smoking gun. German linguists tore this name apart. What the scribe wrote was Mithraism. The root, Mithra, is obvious. That's the Indo-Aryan god. But the suffix, that ashil part, that's not Indo-Aryan, and it's not Hittite either. It's a grammatical ending from Hurrian, the language of the common Mitanni people. So what we're looking at is a Hittite scribe writing down a foreign god's name as spoken by a Hurrian who is trying to represent an Indo-Aryan deity. Mithra wasn't Hittite. He was a foreigner, filtered through a second language. Okay, so the Hittites clearly knew his name. But that brings us to the next big question. Did they actually worship him? I mean, if they did, his name should be all over their religious sites and texts, right? So, is it? Well, the short answer is no. And the reason is simple. There was no job opening. Think about it. Mithra's whole portfolio was about contracts, light, and the sun. But the Hittite pantheon was already totally saturated in that department. The top job, supreme deity of justice, was already taken by the very powerful sun goddess of Arena. They also had a male sky sun god. There was just no room at the inn for another sun god. So, after decades of digging through thousands of tablets, excavating temples, and analyzing every scrap of evidence, how many signs of an active, local Hittite cult of Mithra have we found? The answer is stark. A big, round zero. Yeah, the case goes completely cold. When archaeologists went looking for proof, they found nothing. Not one temple for Mithra in the capital, no prayers, no ritual instructions, nothing. Even at Yazalikia, the great open-air sanctuary where the entire Hittite pantheon is carved into the rock, he's a no-show. His name only ever appears in these diplomatic treaties as a foreign god swearing on behalf of a foreign king. This brings us to the elephant in the room. If this Bronze Age Mithra has no real connection to the Hittites, does he have any connection to the famous Roman Mithras that everyone knows about? I mean, this timeline really puts it all into perspective. You see, there are 4 distinct sightings of a god with this name in Anatolia, but they're separated by these huge gulfs of time and culture. You have our Mitanni Mithra in 1350 BCE. Then, nothing. The name doesn't pop up again for almost 1,000 years, until the Persians bring a Zoroastrian Mithra. Then, centuries later, a local king fuses him with Apollo, and only after all that does the famous bull-slaying Mithras of the Romans show up. There's just no continuous line connecting them. And what about that popular old story you hear about Roman soldiers learning about Mithras from pirates in Anatolia? Well, modern scholars like Manfred Klaus have a big problem with that. There is zero archaeological evidence for that Roman-style Mithras cult in that region at that time. It seems the ancient writer Plutarch was probably just projecting his own contemporary religion backwards onto an old story. So, after looking at the treaty, the language, the archaeology, the timeline, everything, we can finally deliver a verdict in the case of Mithra in the land of the Hittites. When you boil it all down, it comes to this. For the Hittites, Mithra wasn't one of them. He wasn't a god to be worshipped in their temples or called on by their people. He was the god of the other guy, a foreign power, whose divine authority was useful for sealing a contract, but who had no place in their home. And look, this isn't just one person's interpretation. All the major academic schools that study this stuff have landed on the same conclusion. The German school proved it with the language. The French school cataloged all the texts and confirmed he's only in the diplomatic files. And the English-speaking scholars put it all in historical context, showing he was just a marginal figure. The consensus is crystal clear. So, mystery solved. The name on that ancient tablet wasn't the first coming of a Roman god, but the last echo of a forgotten Indo-Aryan elite who ruled a rival kingdom. It's an amazing piece of historical detective work, but it leaves you with one last thought, doesn't it? If a single name can travel that far and be so misunderstood for so long, how many other things we think we know about the ancient world are just a case of mistaken identity?